Chapter 7. What chance luck? Fortune favors the bold. I believe that luck is one of the most misunderstood and underappreciated factors in life. Those people and businesses that are generally considered fortunate or luckier than others are usually also the ones that are prepared to take the greatest risks and, by association, are also prepared to fall flat on their faces every so often. In stark contrast, the play it safe for fear of failing brigade are the ones who just never seem to get as lucky as the risk-takers. Coincidence? I don't think so. Sadly, the vast majority of people seem to view their chances of getting lucky in much the same vein as the likelihood of being struck by lightning, as if it is something over which they have zero control. Well, in my humble opinion, they couldn't be further from the truth. Anyone who wants to make the effort to work on their luck can and will seriously improve it. I remember watching the final round of the British Open Golf Championship on TV and seeing one of the leaders chip out of a deep greenside bunker. His shot was high, but it just clipped the top of the flagpole, and amazingly the ball dropped right into the hole. One of the British commentary team exclaimed, "Oh my goodness, what a lucky shot!" Another commentator in the broadcast booth, a retired American champion as I recall, immediately snapped back with a stinging rebuke. "Lucky? What do you mean, lucky? Do you know how many thousands of hours we all spend practicing shots like that? He was trying to put it in the hole, and he succeeded. Let me tell you, he worked long and hard on getting that lucky." The same sentiment was more eloquently expressed once by Gary Player, one of the all-time golf greats, who famously said, "The harder I practice, the luckier I get." Over the years, like that golfer, I have often been accused of being lucky in business. But I, too, believe that a lot of very hard work has played a major part in any luck that has come my way. I must admit to sometimes struggling to figure out where coincidence stops and good luck begins, or put differently, how just happening to be in the right place at the right time can so dramatically play into one's path through life. A lucky exorcism. One classic example of this phenomenon had a huge bearing on the early success of Virgin Records. To our surprise and delight, our first ever album release, Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, had become a huge hit in the UK, but we were still trying to get someone to take it in the US. Despite this European success and my persistent efforts, I just couldn't seem to convince the legendary head of Atlantic Records, Ahmet Ertegun, that an all-instrumental album would sell in North America. Regrettably, he just didn't get it. Then, one day, while Ahmet just happened to be playing the album in his office, presumably still trying to figure out what all the fuss was about, in walked movie director William Friedkin, looking for backing music for a movie he had in the works. By an amazing stroke of good fortune, before Ahmet could turn it off, Friedkin heard Tubular Bells, instantly loved it, and that was that. He had his backing track, and we had our US deal with Atlantic. Oh yes, and the movie he was working on just happened to be The Exorcist, which was destined to become one of the greatest box-office hits of the day, and so it also helped introduce Tubular Bells to a global audience. You could call it luck if you want, but there again, I'd spent a lot of time yammering away at Ahmet, and if he hadn't been intrigued enough to listen to it one more time, it would probably never have been playing at that critical moment in time. The luck of the Chilean. And then there are those other serendipitous situations that come along perhaps once in a lifetime, where being in the right place at the right time can tee up an opportunity with no preparation at all. When that happens, it falls to the individual's ability to recognize the situation for what it is and seize the moment. My friend, let's call him Antonio, was raised in Santiago, Chile, and eventually attended California's prestigious Stanford University, where he would earn a postgraduate degree in business administration and behavioral sciences. One day, while he was attending Stanford, Antonio was standing at the back of a long line outside a movie theater when he and the stranger next to him were told that the show had sold out and they'd have to come back another day. Equally miffed, the two of them struck up a conversation and, with some unanticipated free time on their hands, ended up going for a cup of coffee together. Over coffee, Antonio asked what the stranger, who was also attending Stanford, was up to, and was told that he and a fellow student were working on a research project that was something to do with search engines. As they parted company, the other student handed over a copy of his research paper and suggested my friend read it over, and they could talk some more the next day. Antonio said he tried reading the highly technical document that night, but the bulk of it was all about algorithms and the like, and way over his head. He was, however, highly intrigued with the object of the exercise, which was to organize the vast amount of information on the web according to the popularity of the pages. In short, it struck him as an idea that had a lot of market potential. When Antonio met up with his new friend the next day, therefore, he asked how he could get involved. He was told they were in the early stages of raising capital to launch their business, that it was valued at $1 million, and they'd love to have him as an investor. In what was to become the watershed moment in his life, Antonio responded by saying, "Well, I have $10,000 that was earmarked for a second-hand car, but I might consider putting it into your company instead. What would that get me?" He was told it would give him a 1% ownership stake, and so they agreed that they had a deal. If you haven't guessed it by now, the student Antonio had been speaking to was one Sergey Brin, and his partner went by the name of Larry Page. Although it was initially nicknamed Backrub, the plan had been to brand their company Google after the mathematical term, but they opted to change this to the quirkier Google. A wacky word, perhaps, but one that was destined to become part of the vocabulary in just about every language on the planet. A counterpoint to my friend Antonio's story is that of Ronald Wayne. Wayne had worked alongside Steve Jobs at Atari and became one of the co-founders of Apple with Jobs and Wozniak. At 40 years of age, Wayne was almost twice as old as his young co-founders, and so he agreed to essentially act as the venture's adult supervisor, in return for which he was given a 10% stake in the nascent company. Among other things, Wayne drew up the partnership agreement between the three, drafted the first company logo, and wrote the Apple I manual. For a variety of reasons, however, Wayne just didn't feel comfortable that things were going to work out. He also didn't particularly enjoy working with Jobs, and so after only a couple of months, Wayne called it quits and relinquished his stock in the company for a one-time payout of $800. Had he toughed it out and hung in there, that stock would today have been worth close to $50 billion. So, was it bad luck or bad judgment? Maybe a bit of both. But I'll let you make up your own mind on this one. My Chilean friend was no Ronald Wayne and has been astute enough never to sell a single Google share and has reinvested all his dividends. He never got the used car, but that $10,000 is now worth billions of dollars. Suffice it to say that the luckiest thing that ever happened to Antonio was going to see a popular movie in a small theater. Had there been just 2 more seats left, his life would have been very different. But in terms of making the luck work for him, he had to have the smarts to recognize an opportunity when it came along, and greater still, the guts to risk his $10,000, about all he had at the time, on a couple of young fellow students with a dream. This one I'd certainly put down to a combination of good luck and good judgment, two elements that the sum of which will always be greater than the whole. Luck Down Under. Over the years, we have had quite a few events around the Virgin companies that have been described as lucky, but perhaps none bigger than in 2000, when we set up shop in Australia with the fledgling Virgin Blue. We started in anticipation of having at least two major competitors in Qantas Airlines and Ansett Australia. Qantas was the flag carrier, and Ansett had been around since 1935. We knew that Ansett had been experiencing financial difficulties, but they had just been acquired by Air New Zealand and Singapore Airlines, so we thought they were probably going to work things out. That was not to be the case, however, and over the Christmas period of 2000, we got a major traffic boost for our then tiny operation when the Australian aviation authorities partially grounded Ansett's fleet for maintenance infractions. They bounced back, however, and in April of 2001 actually made an abortive attempt to buy us out. I was having none of it, which was a clear indication that, as small as we were, they probably saw us as a major future threat to their survival. By September, the writing was on the wall for Ansett when, having funded their loss of almost $200 million in the previous year, Air New Zealand and Singapore Airlines cut them adrift. Then, on the 14th of September 2001, Ansett grounded its entire fleet of 100-plus airplanes and ceased operations, stranding thousands of passengers and pitching upwards of 16,000 staff out of their jobs. Ansett's demise not only suddenly thrust us into the limelight as the country's second-largest carrier, but it also opened up terminal space at a number of airports around Australia where we had been struggling to get decent facilities. So was it luck, or was it more a matter of just happening to be in the right place at the right time? I think, as with my friend Antonio, it was a bit of both. We went into Australia to start the airline, anticipating that Ansett would be part of the scenery for a long time to come. We were comfortable that we could give them a run for their money, and our plans were not based on them going out of business. Did Ansett's demise help us to expand and flourish in Australia at a faster rate than we might otherwise have done? Absolutely. But like Antonio, having the courage to hand over his $10,000, we too had taken the step of putting ourselves in the right place when someone else's misfortune became our good fortune. This wasn't the first time we had experienced such good fortune with our airlines. What happened in Australia was almost a carbon copy of what Virgin Atlantic had experienced in the UK 14 years earlier. In late 1987, just 2.5 years after we took to the skies, British Caledonian, popularly known as BCal, then Britain's second-largest airline, which had been struggling for several years, was acquired by British Airways. At first, we opposed the takeover, thinking it would make for an even more powerful BA, but we quickly realized that this particular cloud had a very silver, if not positively golden, lining. As soon as BCal ceased operations, it opened up some very exciting new routes authorities for us. We were able to pick up London to New York's main international gateway, JFK. We had previously been limited to operating into Newark, New Jersey, as well as Tokyo and Los Angeles, to which we started service to in 1988, 1989, and 1990, respectively. Boston, San Francisco, and Hong Kong would follow later. Had BCal stayed around, we might never have gained access to these very profitable routes, or at the very least, it would certainly have taken much longer for us to get operating approvals. Once again, some called it luck, but I prefer to see it as a direct consequence of having the courage to put yourself in the right place at the right time. Despite all the so-called aviation experts who, as one, had averred that Virgin Atlantic was the wrong idea in the wrong place at the wrong time. It has always intrigued me how people are so quick to say, "Wow, they got really lucky with that one," thereby totally dismissing any possible contribution the lucky one may have made to the positive turn of events. The same people are seldom as swift to say, "Oh, that was just bad luck," when someone experiences a problem, even if through no real fault of their own. I firmly believe that smart leaders and clever entrepreneurs have the knack of engineering their luck. It's also known as risk-taking. Just as Brett Godfrey rolled the dice and they came up sixes by having us in Australia at exactly the right time. So, work hard at improving your luck. Remember not to stand under a tree during a thunderstorm, and never be afraid to talk to strangers. You never know, your Sergei might be out there. You can call it what you like. Luck, good fortune, coincidence, serendipity, right place at the right time, or even hard work. But I think no one has defined this mysterious element any better than the Roman philosopher Seneca, who some 2,000 years ago said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." Amen to that.